Sometimes the best stories in golf aren't found on tour. You'll find them at the back of the range. And here's your host, Ben Adelberg.
Welcome to the Back of the Range Golf Podcast. I am your host, Ben Adelberg. This is episode 93. Thanks so much for all the feedback on the Road to Hoylake series that we just wrapped up. Really cool to connect with all of these young amateurs. Some of the guys we spoke with didn't make the squad, but a lot of them did. All of them incredibly worthy, but only 10 spots were available. Congrats to John Augenstein, the USAM runner-up, and Andy Ogletree, the US Amateur champion, for securing the final 2 spots on the team. The U.S. squad looks very strong as they head over to Hoylake. In the upcoming weeks, we'll get back to our weekly conversations with mid-amateurs, collegiate players and coaches, and perhaps a few tour pros here and there. But before we do that, we have a couple special episodes to lead us right up to the Walker Cup on September 7th and 8th. Before we get started, don't forget, follow the podcast on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're also on YouTube. All that information is available in the show notes of this episode. And if you're looking to pick up some of our merch, we have towels, trucker hats, alignment sticks, tees, you name it, we have it. All of it is available at thebackoftherange.com. And don't forget, if you didn't catch the Road to Hoylake series or if you missed a previous episode, they're all available in Apple Podcast and Spotify. The mojo is clearly working. Congrats to a couple previous guests for getting through stage 1 of LPGA Tour Q School. Haley Moore, the national champion from Arizona, got through, as well as Marissa Masana. She played collegiate golf at Clemson. One of our early guests, her and her caddy Gavin, got through. I know Gavin is rocking the Back of the Range Golf Podcast towel. Plenty of mojo left in that thing, so keep it rolling. Also, congrats to Victor Hovland. Not a big surprise, but he will join Matthew Wolff. He'll join Chris Ventura on the PGA Tour next season. A lot of Cowboys out there. It'll be very interesting to see what they do next season. So this week's guest is probably the perfect guest to have after we completed the Road to Hoylake series. As I said, during this series, I'm talking to a lot of these collegiate and junior players, and they're chasing that dream of maybe one day, just once, representing the United States in the Walker Cup. Our guest this week, well, he did it more times than anyone in the history of the United States Walker Cup team. Jay Sigel played on 9 Walker Cup teams between 1977 and 1993. He never missed one team in 16 years. Jay has more victories, more points, and more matches played than anyone. He was an All-American at Wake Forest. He won back-to-back USAMs and is the only man to win the U.S. Amateur and the U.S. Mid-Amateur in the same year. Our conversation, though, revolved around the Walker Cup because, truthfully, that's what he wanted to talk about. He's a team guy, and the U.S. Walker Cup has been a big part of his life and amateur career. Oh, and by the way, the last playing captain, it's Jay Sigel. 1983 at Hoylake and 1985 at Pine Valley. So it's a thrill and an honor to welcome Jay Sigel to the Back of the Range. Jay, how are you, sir?
I'm fine, Ben, and thank you for thinking to have me say a few words. Yeah, thanks.
Well, you know, we just wrapped up recently our Road to Hoylake series at the Back of the Range Golf Podcast. We highlighted a lot of the hopefuls that were trying to make the 2019 U.S. Walker Cup team. And, you know, through our research and through my just, you know, fascination with the history of the Walker Cup, when you look at the records, your name pops up a whole hell of a lot, which I'm sure you're very well aware of. And we'll talk a lot about Walker Cup later, about, you know, a lot of your victories and a lot of the times you competed for the United States. But we always like to get into a little bit of the history of how someone gets into the game, where they get their start. I'm wondering if you can share just briefly your start in the game and as I said, your experience at Wake Forest.
Sure, Ben. I started playing when I was, I guess, 10 and a half, but that didn't come first. I was caddying, and I tell people I was carrying 3 bags on my right shoulder. You know, back then, you know, this was still the 1900s, not the 1800s.
Okay.
But 3 bags. The bags back then were circular, oftentimes cloth, and they weren't too heavy, but 3 bags was a lot. So I was caddying for 3 people. And my dad was one of them. He said, would you like to try this game? I said, yeah, it'd be a lot better than caddying for you guys.
Of course.
And that's how it started. And it was funny. One of the guys, I would always notice what kind of golf ball they were using. It was a Pinnacle or it was this, but it was brand new. So oftentimes when he'd hit it in the weeds, we could never find it. And that's how I got started. Then I played a fair amount of high school golf, Pennsylvania, interscholastic champion. Went to Wake Forest and had a very interesting college career. And so pleased that I graduated. I'm so proud of being a graduate of Wake Forest and proud to say that my daughters also graduated from there and met my wife while I was there. And wonderful experience.
Yeah, you mentioned Wake Forest. When people think of Wake, they obviously think of Arnold Palmer, and you played there between, I believe it was like 64 and 67.
Mm-hmm.
And that is just about, I'd say, maybe 10 years after Arnold Palmer was there. So right. I guess maybe can you speak to, was there any sort of relationship?
Sure.
Because he's a Pennsylvania guy, and so are you.
Yep.
Yeah. So you're born in Bryn Mawr, and then Palmer is Latrobe, so you got that Pennsylvania to North Carolina connection. So maybe was there a relationship there?
Yes. Interestingly, his father-in-law and my father were best friends, and they were Penn State students, sure. And same fraternity, and so as time went on, as I became a little better junior golfer, my dad called Arnold to see if who I would get a lesson from, my first official lesson at 16. And he said, well, of course, my father. So we traveled to Latrobe. I got a lesson from Deacon, his father, which was very interesting.
Wow.
And found out that he went to Wake Forest, and I was interested in that. So the closure on that story was I was at the Crosby tournament as a winner of the International JC tournament. That was the prize, and was interested. My parents were there. I was 17, and I said to Arnold, Mr. Palmer, could you spend some time with me, a few minutes, this week? And we were at a cocktail party with the likes of Crosby and Hope, and he said, sure, how about right now? I said, sure, happy to. So we went over and sat down in a comfortable chair, and we talked for at least a half hour while all of the famous celebrities were around, but he took his time with me. That tells you a lot about Arnold.
Yeah.
That progressed to my receiving the first Arnold Palmer scholarship, which was a thrill, to say the least. And Arnold had some say in that, which was nice.
So you sit with him at the Crosby, which is now the AT&T,
right.
The Pebble Beach Pro-Am. So you're sitting there at Pebble Beach talking to Arnold Palmer. What was the conversation? Was it about like what you should do with your amateur career, or should you go to Wake Forest, or was it golf advice?
That's a good question, Ben. Arnold wasn't a good student like I wasn't. He said you really have to see it.
Okay.
To see what it's all about. I mean, the women are attractive. The campus is beautiful, but you got to go to class, and you need to see it for yourself. So a funny one, I arranged that through the coach, Jesse Haddock. So I arrived, and this is so funny.
Perfect.
The students on the campus would say, "How you doing? Hi, how are you?" I wasn't familiar with that from a town like Philadelphia. Nobody spoke unless you thought you were going to get robbed.
Okay.
So I said to Coach Haddock, after all these people are saying, hello, how are you? I said, Jesse Haddock, how did all these people know I was coming today? And of course, that was not the case. They didn't know. That's just how friendly the atmosphere was on the campus at Wake Forest.
That's great. That's a funny story. So you have this great career at Wake Forest, and I guess for people that know a little bit about your story, but they'll think, okay, well, you're All-American at Wake Forest. Obviously, you're going to turn pro, and why doesn't Jay Sigel have PGA Tour victories? You have Champions Tour victories, but why doesn't he have PGA Tour victories? It comes back to probably one of the, gosh, as far as like taking a fork in the road, this is probably one of the most important moments of your life, and it happens with a freak accident.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, that changes the course of your life just randomly.
Yeah. 1963, summer school. Coach was waiting for me. I had to go make a phone call. My hand went through a window pane in the dormitory door. We weren't fooling around, and cut the nerve and tendons. Cut some padding off my hand, and I had to go back and get it afterward. But I guess it was 10 days in the hospital and some question whether I'd play again. So that was a huge, huge occurrence in my life. And as I have said numerous times, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And you probably would ask, how is that? And that is because I met the woman that I married, and she hit me with a few things. I was not a good student, as I said, and I was way behind. She said, listen, if we get married and we have children, how are you going to explain to them that you didn't finish what you started? Oh, that was pretty powerful.
That'll knock you on your butt pretty quick, won't
yes,
it?
Won't it? So that was the impetus to get myself in gear. Of course, I didn't play for 11 months or something like that. And when I did play after that, it was very painful, but I had to suck it up and get it done. I finally graduated in 1967, which was a real thrill and a lot of fun. So yeah, that was clearly a blessing in disguise. I didn't know it at the time. Folks told me that I would be, I would know that things happen for a reason, but how would a kid who's just in college, just 20 years old, know that this was going to be a blessing? But actually, I didn't have anything else. I had to believe that, and sure enough, that's what happened. And I wouldn't have graduated. I wouldn't have met my wife. I would have turned pro. Might have failed. When you start off in life, you don't want to start off failing. I could have set the stage for the rest of my life, which might not have been as wonderful as it's been.
Well, and the other thing too, when people look at the way professional golf is now, there's so many avenues that you can go to try and make it. There's developmental tours, there's the Challenge Tour in Europe, there's the Corn Ferry, there's all these different options, and there's a lot more money in it now with endorsement deals and sponsorships. Right. Trying to make it in 19, I guess you probably would have turned pro. I mean, if you stayed the entire 67, 68, I mean, something like that.
Yeah, I would have left school because I wouldn't have continued. So I'd have turned pro probably 65.
Okay.
There was no money. I mean, some people know this, but back then the pros really weren't allowed in the clubhouses. I mean, a golf pro wasn't the highest position for folks. So it was tough. I mean, they changed the shoes in the parking lot back then many times, and quite different today. So.
Yeah. I'm kind of struggling here because there are so many things I can focus on and talk to you about, but I'd like to talk about Walker Cup. But before I do that, let me just at least throw this out there so that listeners can understand. Listeners can have a little bit of an understanding of your accomplishments in your amateur career. Back-to-back U.S. amateur champions in 82, 83. Won the U.S. Mid-Am in 83. Won it in 85 and 87. That's just USGA stuff. There is Sunny Hannah wins, Northeast amateur wins. So I know that talking about your individual accomplishments is not exactly what you would like to do, and I'd like to talk about more of the team stuff, which I know you're incredibly proud of with the Walker Cup.
Great.
So I'm going to give you a pass on that, but you never know. We may have to revisit that someday down the line. But let's talk about Walker Cup. As I said earlier in the introduction, this is something that you were a part of. I mean, a record 9 U.S. team appearances. No one has done that. Highest point winner, but your first appearance in the Walker Cup was in 1977. Your last appearance was in 93 at Interlaken. But 77, you're on the U.S. team. It's at Shinnecock. I asked this to a lot of the guys that are trying to make the team this year. When did Walker Cup first get on your radar? Because again, you're not in college anymore, so you're about 10 years out of school.
Right. Well, after my heartbreak of my hand injury, and it took me a while to get going, and that was my goal. I mean, I never dreamed that I could win the U.S. Amateur. So I finally made the Walker Cup. I played well in the majors, the Northeast and the Susquehanna and the Porter Cup.
Yeah.
But not till 77, and that was quite an experience, one that I'll never, ever, ever forget.
So you play Shinnecock, you're there, and I guess, I mean, you're there, it's your first time there, and you're going against guys, I mean, Sandy Lyle's on the GB&I team.
Right.
I guess, when you first get there, what is the experience? And
it was incredible. We drove Long Island, my wife and I, and arrived and on schedule. Shivers already claiming us, nerves, so excited. And the practice, I had to calm down and practice because everybody's looking at everybody else. And if that was, I had reached my goal, which I had, you needed to perform well, never thinking that you'd be invited back. So it was so exciting. I can tell you the flag raising was beyond belief, tears in my eyes, and unreal. So getting ready to play, I was paired with Mike Brannon, who passed away several years ago. Great guy. Literally, Ben, we did not decide who was going to hit first until we got to the tee markers. I would say it was within 1 minute. I had my hands on my clubs. He had his hand on his clubs.
Nope.
Now, Mike Brannon hits this as straight as anyone. I'm not too far behind him, but I was so glad he says, I'll hit. Let me hit. So he hits a perfect drive. I said, oh, my goodness. So floated down that first fairway to the ball. 145 yards to the pin. A little bit downwind. I said, well, this is some kind of a wedge. Well, that would be a long wedge for me. Hit a pitching wedge. Pretty good shot. 20 yards over the green.
Of course. Yeah, I knew exactly where you're going with that because you're just jacked up on all this adrenaline.
Mike was a great partner, and we won, and it was unbelievable. Unbelievable. Indescribable.
Yeah. Now, your first one obviously is in the United States, and I'm going to hit on a couple of the other. I'm not going to hit on every single team you played on, but I do find it kind of funny that you're playing in 77, huge margin of victory in 77, and I guess one of the persons that was on the GB&I team was Sandy Lyle, and then you meet 10 years later where he wins the Masters, and you're the low-am. I mean, did you have a little bit of conversation there where you're looking at him, he's looking at you, saying, I just saw you a decade ago, and here's how our lives went in different directions?
Absolutely. And many times. I still can see him hitting that 7-iron out of the bunker at 18. I was, I believe, waiting for him in the cabin for the awards. And I've reminded him of that many, many times. Sandy's a wonderful guy. And, of course, we played the senior tour golf together. And it was pretty cool.
So you were the last. So you're the last U.S. captain to actually a couple things. So you're the last U.S. captain to be at Hoylake in 1983. You were the captain of that team. You're also the captain of the team in 1985 at Pine Valley, and you're also the last playing captain in U.S. history. So we've not had a playing captain since you in '85. you never had the opportunity as a captain to ride around the course and kind of follow guys and get a sense of how they're playing and if they're in form. And boy, I think everyone that's a golf fan loves to kind of be a armchair quarterback and talk about the Ryder Cup and the President's Cup and who should be on the team and who shouldn't and how do they make the pairings. What was your experience as a captain being a playing captain?
For the most part, back then, the playing captain didn't participate in the selection process.
Okay.
But we kind of, the captain, or at least I was told who was being considered. But the players I played with all year, played for the last 2 years together, competed against, saw them at their best, saw them at their worst, so that when we got together and I was their captain, I think my job was to pick them up when they were a little bit nervous,
Sure.
Really focus on their confidence, remind them that they deserved the spot, that they earned the spot, that my focus was for them to play maybe 3 times. So just because you're not playing your best, I still want you to play what you earned. And the enjoyment is certainly part of the whole deal. Winning is not everything. However, I wanted to win more than anybody. So that and then we decided on who on the team would play for time. And interestingly, they picked me a few times to do that, which was an honor. So to be picked as playing captain is one of the highest honors I think the USGA can give someone, along with the Bob Jones Award. So it was just, it was just great times. Great time.
One of the things I wanted to ask you, one of the things that's talked a lot about when the U.S. goes over to the UK, when the GB&I team is the host, and just like it is this year at Hoylake, you've played at Hoylake. A lot of discussions brought up about, can the U.S. guys that are used to playing, largely a game in the air and a lot of, target golf, can they acclimate their games to links golf? Is there too much made of that, or is there a large home course advantage that the UK team has? I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are and maybe how you advised your players in '83 or how you advised, the guys on your team in when you went over to Sunningdale and when you, were over at Port Marinac. So I'm just curious, what's your thought on the Americans going over to the UK?
Great question. Our guys were experienced. I mean, we had guys from Texas, California, all over the place. And since the U.S. is so huge, guys would play all year many times. Even the established amateurs, they were all over and all kinds of weather, all kinds of conditions, different kinds of grass. I didn't think that would be a problem. I was quite confident on our team until I walked onto Hoylake the first time. I mean, it's I would say nothing like we had seen before. Flat, treeless, narrow fairways, out of bounds, wind was blowing, raining. They had, probably dunes, and I think they may have small dunes or knobs or banks, whatever you want to call it. Those, I think, were installed back during the war to avoid the enemy from landing their aircraft on that expanse of ground. So, interesting. Yeah, it was. I don't think anything like we'd ever seen before. At least it wasn't for me, given when you add the weather.
You had amazing players on that team, names like, Willie Wood and Faxon, who've gone on to the PGA Tour. And then, we had Jim Holtgreave on an episode previously. He was one of your players, just like Bobby Lewis. And then, then you got the kid who is now this year's captain, Nathaniel Crosby. Just, his victory at Olympic in the U.S. Amateur, just, probably one of the, got to be up there as one of the most memorable U.S. Amateur victories of all time.
Yes.
I'm just curious, you get him over there on your side. What are your memories about being his captain over there in Hoylake?
Well, it brings up an interesting story. As we were going along, he and his partner sort of weren't playing very well, and they volunteered themselves to sit out.
Okay.
That doesn't happen always, and I give them credit for that, and that takes a lot of guts to do that. Obviously, they wanted the team to win, and they didn't think that they could perform as well. So rather than possibly losing 2 points, I asked if they wouldn't play in the foursomes in the morning, and they said they would like that, and that's what they did. So put them out. They won the match against the other team's best team, and what are you going to say other than that was pretty cool? Uh-huh. And I give them credit for doing that. That won us the match. I mean, that match was so close. Most of the matches went to the last hole, and a shot here or there would have switched the victory.
And you're talking about the match against McGregor and Walton, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Philip was their best player.
Yeah, Philip Walton. Yeah.
And George had the most experience. So, I mean, between talent and experience, that's a tough go.
I'm just looking at the list of guys that have come through the Walker Cup between your time there, 77 and 93. And I mean, names like, Davis Love III was on your team in 85 at Pine Valley. And then you have Mickelson and, Sutton and Pavin were on the team in 81. A lot of these guys have gone on to be captains. Like I said, Crosby's going to be the captain of this year's team. Davis was a Ryder Cup captain. So was Sutton and Pavin. I know it's such a tight network, but have any of your former players reached out to you to discuss their thinking going into captaining their teams?
No, they haven't. And there's a reason for that. The USGA asked the captains to give a detailed report of everything, really.
Okay.
Thing that occurred, the housing, the food, the golf course, the setup, this, that, and the other thing. And we, after seeing previous reports, we knew what to cover in our reports. And in fact, I was talking to Jim Holcreeve the other day when we were at the Walker Cup reunion, and I said something about how unfortunate it was. We had this incident that got corrected, which I can't really talk about. He said, "Oh yeah, the one about the." I said, "That's right. How do you know?" He said, "You remember the reports?" I said, "Oh yes, I had." So I had to put that in there. And of course, this report, the report of Hoylake showed the wonderful experience with the two guys I was just talking about, Hoffer and
Walton.
Yeah, Hoffer and Crosby.
So this is basically a almost like a captain's journal of the Walker Cup.
Correct.
Wow.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to see it.
Oh, of course. You mentioned that I think a lot of people know that Jack Nicklaus suggested that Europe be included in the Ryder Cup because it just seemed to be getting out of hand with the U.S. dominating that so much. And I think it can be argued that's one of the most significant moments in Ryder Cup history. Just, Mr. Nicklaus suggesting, hey, we need to make this more competitive. You mentioned that winning is not the most important thing.
Right.
What is something that you feel should be or could be done to boost the Walker Cup into more of a prominent light in the the modern view of golf right now?
Great question. When I look back at Hoylake, the record at that time was U.S. 26 victories out of 29 matches.
Yeah.
So as we advanced from there, we won Pine Valley, so 27 and 3, and then things started to change a little bit, and I think that was caused by, the other team started winning. The college program was recruiting these fine players, from Great Britain and Ireland, and Scotland, and they were going to. I mean, Colin Montgomery went to Sam Houston State or something. So guys were coming to the U.S. We got Florida State, Florida, and they were improving their games with better weather situations and better course conditions, and then coming back to the Walker Cup and giving us a hard time. So we were oftentimes playing against scholarship kids on the other team, and we had 3-4 older amateurs like myself. So things were starting to even out, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, so you're seeing guys that maybe previously the GB&I guys, you didn't know who they were, and now you're seeing GB&I guys that go to college in the United States where
absolutely.
Yeah, so they're not really at a disadvantage playing in the United States because they've been doing it all year long in college.
You got it. I was told when we didn't win at Peachtree, which was extremely painful for me.
You notice I didn't bring that up yet, right?
Yeah, I know it. I thought I'd beat you to it. It was extremely painful, and I was told two things: that glad that Jay Sigel was in that position because he'll be able to handle it. Well, I didn't think I could. And secondly, this is very good for the matches, going forward. So it gives encouragement to the other team, which I understood, but I didn't like to be part of the losing.
It's kind of interesting. That happens right around the time that Europe beats the United States at Muirfield.
Oh, yeah.
And it's almost like you're saying the exact same thing that Jack Nicklaus said when he was captaining that team.
It was, and I agree with it. It was good for the matches and the history going forward, because I think there was some danger. I mean, obviously the record there at 30-3, wasn't very good.
Yeah, exactly. Let me ask you a little. Let's shift gears a little bit away from your one single team loss in the Walker Cup team. I mean, you went 8-1. Let me ask you. You played in 11 Masters. A couple of them you were exempt, or you were invited to play the Masters because of your U.S. Amateur win and your U.S. Mid Amateur win. But most of them were because of your participation on the Eisenhower Trophy and the Walker Cup team.
Right.
You were there for some of the greatest Masters. I mean, you're there for Crenshaw in 84. You're there for, obviously, Mr. Nicklaus in 86. I could just we could fill up a whole episode of Masters stories, but you also attended a bunch of the amateur dinners. Any specific amateur dinners or interactions that you've had over your 11 appearances? You're low amateur, I believe, 3 times.
I think Nicklaus's victory in 86, at his age 46, with Jackie on the bag, it was fabulous. That was, to me, one of the great sporting events of all time. Perhaps the U.S. hockey team winning the Olympics was the other one.
Yeah.
But that was, and I certainly sent him a note, and just unbelievable. The Masters dinners were fabulous. We were told that Bobby Jones wanted the amateurs to attend and play and do well and so on and so forth. So that was cool. But I think the things that stand out in my mind were, and I want to talk about playing with Sam Snead. But
please do.
First of all, the amateur was paired with a Masters champion first round.
Yeah. Unless
the amateur was an amateur winner. Then he was paired with the Open winner. And then same thing would hold for the British Open, the Open. So the amateur got to play with some wonderful players. It seemed to me that I got to play with Seve and Tom Watson all the time, and that was great. I've never seen better hands on any golfer than those two guys. I mean, Seve could get it up and down out of whatever, and Watson was the same, and nice guys too. But the Snead story is one of my all-time greatest. I would say this was 87, 86. we're on the tee, and the spring at Augusta, April, can be cool, rainy, windy. You wouldn't probably go out of your home in that kind of weather. So here we are on the first tee. I had pretty much all the clothing I could have on, plus a rain suit, umbrella, and all that stuff. As Sam did, he said, Jay, he said, I don't know why I'm doing this. This is my last round at Augusta. He said, I can't see out of my one eye at all. And I mean, I just can't play, and I'm freezing. I said, well, I'm freezing too, Sam. Now, I think he was 76 or 7 then. I don't know. And I was in 86. I don't know. I was 40, 42, 3, 4. Anyway, long story short, he hit every shot on the button, every shot. He putted side saddle. I'm guessing he shot 83 or 4. I played my heart out for 78 or somewhere in that area. Don't hold me to that, but it was quite an experience to see that at his age, walking around the golf course. What an athlete he was.
That's incredible for him to be able to do that at that age.
I'll say.
Yeah. I still can't get over just the fact that you go into these Walker Cup experiences with 9 other guys on your team, and you mentioned you guys have your Walker Cup reunions, but to be able to play on the Walker Cup team, and then you as a team all get together again at Augusta National,
right,
as another reunion.
Yeah.
I mean, it was kind of sad to see that go away, where the Masters
Yes.
no longer invites the team there. I think that probably ended around like 90 or 91,
right,
somewhere in that neighborhood. And what's interesting is one of your Walker Cup teammates is now the chairman at Augusta National.
right.
So I know I've talked briefly about this with Holtgreave. Is that a conversation that you've ever had with him, where you've said, hey, can we get the boys back into Augusta National?
I think we're smart enough to not ask that question. I mean, okay. we were told by Howard Harden that Bobby Jones always wanted the Walker Cup team there. Well, that changed, and the statement was that there are too many people, too many players in the field. Quite frankly, the field hasn't changed its size since then. So that's unfortunate for real. The other thing that's kind of strange, a Walker Cup or a U.S. Amateur champion always is invited to the Augusta to participate in the par 3, attend, get tickets, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Unless you turn pro. So I was able to do that up until the point I turned pro, and that is no longer available, which is unfortunate. Times do change, and that's okay. I think Fred has done a wonderful job. He was a great captain. We had some funny stories. In fact, I can think of a couple. If you're willing.
Absolutely.
We were at Sunningdale. A great thing is that, our matches, while they're competitive, were very friendly. And I was playing a guy named Bobby Ego. And we started down the first hole, and I hit par 5. I hit a wonderful hooking 4-iron in there about 10 feet. I was so proud of myself. And I see this fella hit from about the same spot, and he's hit it in over the bunker. And I said, well, that's dead. Long story short, it went in the hole. So he made it 2. He made it 2. And as we get to the green, he said, yours is good. Take your eagle. So it was, all in good fun, but certainly competitive. And at the same time, these matches in Great Britain, Ireland, and Scotland are on BBC all day. And when you get down to 1 or 2 matches, the poor announcers, I'm sure they're looking for material to talk about. Well, so happens that Peter Alice, who I thought was a fabulous announcer, he's covering the last couple matches, I was one of them. So he goes, I don't know what hole it was, and he said, Jay Sigel, career amateur, this, that, and the other thing. 6'1". He's got the biggest feet of anybody his size I've ever seen. He's got the biggest hands as far as I've ever seen for a man his size. He said, as far as his other accoutrements are concerned, he says, I don't really know.
Oh, God. Well,
yeah.
that does sound like something that Peter Alice would say.
Yeah. So that evening we were seeing a replay, and the guys were hooting and hollering about me, and they thought that was pretty funny. That
helps to get that kind of publicity, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We talk about Bobby Lewis and Jim Holcreef. Those two guys were heart and soul of our teams. When you watch them compete, I mean, they let it all hang out. Their eyes were bulging. Their vessels were popping. They were going to give it 120%, not 110. And it was just nice to be part of a team that they were on. Not that we didn't have others like that.
Right.
But that was just terrific. Another story, if you wish.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was, as my game improved in the 70s and I was winning stroke play tournaments, I didn't really fully appreciate match play. I mean, because the better player can be down the road just as quick as anything, snap of a finger. And Peter McAvoy was one of the great players for the Great Britain team. And he took me aside one time. He says, you've got to change your attitude about match play. So here's a competitor. We played against each other in the British Amateur, Walker Cup. So you got to change your attitude. It's more difficult at match play than it is stroke play. You've got to perform in the present, in the moment, and get it done. There are 4 or 5 critical times during the match. And the more I thought about it, he was right. And I changed my attitude. Look what it did to my match play. Pretty interesting. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, your match play record, like I said, earlier in this episode, I mean, most USA victories, most times competed for the USA, most USA points won, and most matches played. It's just absolutely incredible. I want to ask you about just one match, and then I'd like to close with just, I think people listening realize that you're one of the greatest amateurs of all time, and I'd like to ask a couple of questions about just being a regular golfer. So
sure.
Before I hop into that, though, please, and I know you've done it before, but please share the story of your singles match in '85 against Mr. Colin Montgomery.
Oh, jeez. How'd you come to ask that one?
The thing that I find so fascinating about, first of all, '85 is that, it's at Pine Valley. You're a member at Pine Valley. You're the playing captain of the U.S. team at one of your home courses, and here comes the GB&I team, and you're going against Colin Montgomery, and we all know what he has done in his career. It's actually funny. His Ryder Cup record is kind of a mirror to your Walker Cup record.
Yeah, interesting. I didn't know that. I didn't know anything about Colin at the time, but I knew he was their hotshot golfer, and he told his team that he hoped to get paired against the old guy, meaning me. Well, how that happened, I have no idea. It's the U.S., the home team. No, the away team puts their team down, and the home team puts their players where they want them.
Yeah, they counter.
Yeah, so I don't recall my involvement in that, but that's what happened. Match play. So out we go. I knew he was good, and I had a caddy there named Elmer at Pine Valley who helped me win a number of events there and helped in my Walker Cup quest. In any event, the pins were like I'd never seen before. I mean, Pine Valleys can be a pretty tough golf course, particularly if you've got speed on the greens, and the pins tucked. So I happened to have a great day tee to green, remembering that Montgomery wanted to beat the old guy.
Mm-hmm.
He was going to slaughter him. So, long story short, I played some of the best golf I've ever played, almost a perfect round of golf given where the pins were. And he lost 6-4 to my 6 under par. And little did I know that he'd requested this, but at the party after the event, he told me about it. We had a few beers over that story and laughs, and pretty cool.
That's great. And then I'm sure you've been able to bump into him from time to time. So that's a nice little, yeah.
Oh, we joke about it. He also asked me another thing. He said he wanted to know if I thought he should stay amateur. I mean, he was quite a fine player, or he had a chance to sell golf equipment and turn pro. I said, thinking of it at the time, he was a little, well, he's like he is today. He was a little soft, had a caddy swing, but produced fabulous results. So I said, you ought to stay amateur, sell golf equipment, so on and so forth. Well, between those two stories, we've had some hoots over the years. Unbelievable. He said, boy, you're a hell of a judge of talent.
Yeah, he's gone on to quite the career. Well, I think we could probably go on for hours, but I want to kind of wrap up with just a couple random thoughts and random questions, and they're not really related to USGA or Walker Cup or anything, but I'm just curious. You've traveled all over the world playing golf at these just phenomenal courses and tournaments and all these great experiences that most of us will never, ever get the chance to do. But, you're just like the rest of us. You're a golfer, and at some point you got to put your clubs in a bag and put them on an airline. In your many years of competition, have you ever had any close calls with your sticks not showing up?
Absolutely. Muirfield, 79, Walker Cup.
Oh God, Oh no,
they didn't arrive for like 4 days. So the day before the matches started, I mean, I played out of Scott Hoke's bag. Now this is an amazing story, and played okay. And we had to do our practice. I had to practice with his club. Finally, my clubs arrived, and he and I ended up being partners. So we won 4 points that week. Little did I know that we would reach the finals of the British Amateur the next week, head to head, 36 holes. Unfortunately, I was able to be victorious, but that was quite an experience. I didn't much care for that. So
I can imagine.
No clubs.
79 Walker Cup, Muirfield.
Yep.
Ouch.
Yep.
Being a low handicapper myself, and I can't even believe I'm saying that to you, but I'm somewhere in the same zip code, maybe. But I have experiences where maybe someone will say to me, "Oh, Ben, you're a low handicapper, and I'm not. You don't want to play with me. I'll just be in your way, and I'll keep you up." What are your kind of casual games with your buddies? And I'm sure that not every single one of your buddies is a Walker Cupper. So, what are some of the stories about maybe your casual games around the club that you're playing with guys that, aren't named Lewis, Holtgreave, and Giles?
Yeah. I think that's a great question. I think that I want to disarm the general golfer that gets paired with me, make him feel as comfortable as possible. And, some stories, some jokes, casual, not a big deal. Enjoy, just enjoy the weather, the flowers, the planting, whatever. And anyway, I want them comfortable. And it's interesting, the information you find out. I mean, they're nervous because I'm a good golfer.
Right.
Do they ever think that I'm nervous because they've grown their company from 72 employees to 7,000? I'd like to find out how they did that. So, it goes both ways. And I've gotten some wonderful conversation and met some very talented and fun people. But I would like to say this, that during my career, but from early 40s till 50, when I turned pro, it was a group of guys that really kept me in the game during that period called the Usuals.
Okay.
The Usuals were a group at Aronimink that the usual game would be the usual betting game. And then the unusual would be double the usual betting game. That came about because several of the guys wanted to have me as a partner, and we couldn't decide who was who and what we were playing for till the first or second hole to see how I started. So I fixed them. We got it set. It's the usuals or the unusual. But seriously, they caught me speeding. I shot for a bunker on a par 5 instead of trying to get it on the green because I knew I was going to lose the hole, but I'd get more trash, if you know what I mean.
Sure, yeah.
If I got a sandy birdie rather than just a birdie. So I cherished those games. We had a lot of laughs, and I would win almost every time. It was cash, so I played extra hard.
Of course.
And I would end up taking all them out to dinner with their wives. Nothing
better than that. I've talked to younger amateurs and even some junior players and professionals, and I always like asking a question. We're all golfers. We all like gear. We all like stuff. A new driver, a head cover, a fresh dozen golf balls. Do you remember the first U.S. national bag that you received, or shirts, or anything? Because we're all the same. So I'm wondering, what was the first thing you received?
Well, I have my first Walker Cup bag. It was cloth, small. I don't think it was waterproof. And I have my first shirts and hats. Those aren't going anywhere.
Wow.
Those aren't going anywhere. Later on, as the bags got fancier and prettier, and I've donated to various clubs that have requested them. But that was, it was quite funny. The team gear has substantially improved.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Now they're all fashion models out there, aren't they?
That's right.
Well,
exactly.
Well, we'll wrap this up. I feel there's a lot left on the table. Hopefully we can do it again, but I want to wrap it up. If you had the opportunity at Hoylake to pop your head into the U.S. team room and just say a couple words to the guys that are getting ready to represent their country, as someone that's done it more times than anyone in history, what are maybe a couple things you might share with these young guys getting ready to go play at Hoylake?
Have fun, and remember, your selection was earned. Don't ever forget that, and play well.
Simple as that. Jay, I can't thank you enough. This has been a thrill. I'm so glad we were able to spend some time talking about your amateur career and obviously Walker Cup career. And I hope we can do it again sometime. Thanks for stopping by the back of the range.
Ben, my pleasure. You've got something pretty neat, and I wish you the best of luck.
And there you have it. Special thanks to the legend, Jay Sigel, for joining us this week here at the Back of the Range Golf Podcast. Don't forget, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. All that information available at thebackoftherange.com. And we'll see you next week here at the Back of the Range.